Hi and welcome to WEH Videos. My name is Skip and I'm going to start a new series here on something really different. I don't know about you, but I'm really tired of using the mouse to set my comm and nav radios and anything else I have to use the mouse for. I would much rather have switches and buttons to use. So what I'm going to do in this series is show you how you can create your own instrument panel. Now this is my prototype panel. These are momentary switches, so they're always in the off position, just like your keys on a keyboard. You push it down and it releases, and up and it releases. Same thing with the push buttons here. These are momentary switches, and this will work exactly like a keyboard. And how is that possible? Well, let's take a look at the back. So this is a circuit board that I've removed from a keyboard. It's got the USB wire on it, so we're going to plug it right into a USB port. I've soldered wires onto the little contactors, and then I've wired up all the switches. So basically, this is a keyboard. So when you go into X-Plane, you're going to go to Settings, Joystick and Equipment, and on the Keys tab, you will just click these buttons and you'll be able to program them just like a normal keyboard. Now I'm not sure what my end product's going to look like yet, but I have some ideas. And here's another template I'm working on, another prototype. It might just fit right over the top of my yoke. Now this is going to be, say, COM1. And this will be to raise and lower the whole number and raise and lower the decimal number and the flip-flop button. And I plan to populate this whole circuit board with everything that I now have to click with the mouse, I will be able to do with a button and switch. Now this, like I said, is not the end product. I don't know exactly what it is going to look like, but this is just the ideas I have right now. Now you may not want to go as far as I want to go, so maybe you just want to make a little board you could mount right up here with just a couple of switches. Or how about you jet pilots? Or you pilots with that overhead panel? How about creating a circuit board that you could put above your monitor and then just click the buttons and the switches instead of having to change your view and use the mouse? So much nicer. So those are just some ideas I have. And in this series, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to create your own instrument panel. I'll show you how to remove the circuit board. I'll show you how to solder. I'll give you some soldering tips and instruction. I'll show you how to identify the wires that you're going to need to use. Everything you need to know you will learn in this series. So if you want to build your own instrument panel along with me, let's get started. So let's take a look at what we're going to need to build this panel. For tools, we're going to need a little pair of needle nose pliers, some wire strippers, and some side cutters for cleaning up after we solder, cutting off those little pieces that may extend a little too far. We're going to need some solder. Now this is resin core solder, not acid core like the plumbers use, so make sure the solder you get is suitable for electronics. You're going to need makeup wire or hookup wire, and I suggest 24 AWG solid wire. It's easy to use and easy to find, and I suggest you get quite a bit of it for when we go to identify what wires create the characters we need. It's nice to have a nice long wire here so we can move from wire to wire without disturbing the wires on our circuit board. You can always use this excess wire for the other part of your hookup work. Naturally, we're going to need our components, our push button switches and our momentary switches. Both of these are momentary. This is very important. Momentary switches. A solder sucking tool. So when you make that mistake, which you will, you can push this guy in, set it on the part that you want to desolder, heat it up with the soldering iron, snap it off there. That'll suck the solder off that component and you'll be able to take the wire off and resolder. Then we have a third hand. You don't really need this, but it might come in handy. Just a block of wood with a coat hanger, alligator clips on the end. Sometimes it's helpful to maybe hold a wire in position while you're soldering it, so you can use this to keep a wire coming out a certain way that you want. Alright, so those are the tools. Now your material, of course, you're going to need a panel material, and this is a 3/16 piece of plywood I bought at Home Depot. It comes in a 2x4 sheet at $6. Can't go wrong there. And it actually looks quite nice. So that's panel material. Now maybe you don't want a big panel. Maybe you just want a small little panel. So get yourself a little enclosure. And the next thing you're going to need is 1/4-inch graph paper. And you're going to use this to lay out your components on your panel. So here's my latest panel. I've decided instead of using this panel here, which didn't quite work out, I am now going to use 2 panels on either side of my monitor. So as you can see, I have the graph paper here with components on it. And I've drawn a little circle around the little X's there, the little squares, and I'm going to take my trusty nail and my hammer, the nail right on that X, whack it with the old hammer, and that's going to put little dents all across the panel, and then I'll know where to drill my holes. And finally, and most important, we need an old keyboard that we can take apart to get the circuit board out of. So let's get started. So here's a keyboard I purchased at the Salvation Army. It's a USB keyboard. I recommend USB. Simple board, it cost me $5. Now to take out the circuit board, it's really pretty simple. We turn the circuit board over and we have screws all around here. Now I've taken out most of the screws already just to keep this video short. So let's take out the rest of the screws to see what we have here. How's this for overkill for taking out these screws, huh? So we're just going to take out the last couple of screws to expose the circuit board. So that's it. Now we're just going to take this back off, like so. And here we have the transparency with all the traces for each key. So we're going to pull that up. There's 2 of them usually, yeah. And right over here is the circuit board. And that's pretty simple. We're just going to lift this out of here, and there you have it. That's all that's necessary for removing the circuit board from the keyboard. So let's take a closer look at this circuit board. As you can see, we have contacts here, and what we're going to have to do is solder a wire to each one of these contacts. There is a film on top of these, and in order to solder a wire to these contacts, we're going to have to get a little knife or something and scrape that little bit of a film off. You need to be very careful when you're doing this, because these little strips of copper on here, these contacts, are very thin and they're not very strong. So you can use a pocket knife, or maybe you have a little X-Acto knife. That'll work too. Anything with a little tip on it where you can just slowly scrape that off. So what you want to do is clean off every one of those, and then we're going to solder wires onto each one of these. So let's continue on. Alright, to make this a little easier to work with the circuit board, I'm going to attach it to a piece of wood. Now I've got a little pilot hole I've drilled here, and I'm just going to get a small screw, stick it on there, get my trusty screwdriver, and I'm just going to screw this down to hold the circuit board in place when I'm working. I don't want to tighten it up too much, and you want to make sure that it's not touching or covering one of those little contacts. It doesn't have to be tight, just enough to keep it from moving. And there you go. Now we can move the circuit board around, and it'll stay wherever we put it. When we solder, we can hold our hands on it, keep it from moving. Alright, before you do any soldering, you want to make sure that your iron is clean. You want a nice silver tip. So you're going to get yourself a nice wet sponge, and after the iron's heated up, you want to wipe it off a little bit, and take a look and make sure it has a nice silver tint on it. If it doesn't, if it's still a little dark or something, get a little solder, dab it on there, turn it around a little bit, get a paper towel, and just knock that little layer of solder off the tip, and you should end up with a nice silver tip. This is what your tip needs to look like all the time when you're soldering. So as you're soldering component after component, make sure that you clean the tip occasionally. And it doesn't hurt to have just a little dab of solder on the tip. That'll help with the heat transfer, and the soldering will go just a little bit quicker. All right, I've scraped off all the contacts, and as you can see here, I hope the contacts are nice and shiny now. You want to make sure you get them nice and shiny so the solder will stick to them. And that's what we're going to do next here. Normally you don't solder the way I'm going to show you how to do here, but since we really only have one try with these little contacts, they are delicate, we're going to put a little dab of solder on each one of these contacts before we try to solder the wires. So there are a couple of ways to do this. What I like to do is put a little bubble of solder on a soldering iron. So there's just a small bubble there. Then I'm just going to lay it on top of the contact and just hold it there until the contact gets nice and hot, and it will take the solder. I hope you can see that. There's a nice little bit of solder there now on the contact. Next thing we want to do is do the same thing with the wire. We're going to take the wire, we're going to put a little bit of solder again on the tip of the soldering iron, and then we're going to touch the wire to the soldering iron to get a little bit of solder on the wire. Now what this is going to do is going to make it really easy to solder these two pieces together, because there's solder, a little bit of solder on each one. So now we take the wire and we hold it right on the contact. Now we're just going to heat up the two pieces together. So we just hold the soldering iron there, get them nice and hot, and there you have it. That was very quick because we already had solder applied to both pieces. So after we do this, I actually put crazy glue on here because it's non-conductive, and it's going to help hold those wires and those contacts in place. And that's all there is to it, to solder the wire to the circuit board. Alright, as you can see, I've finished soldering all the wires on the circuit board, and I've removed the circuit board from that larger piece of wood and placed it on this smaller block of wood, which will be part of my panel. I've also super glued the wires to this little block of wood. Reason being, next time when we start moving these wires around, we don't want to have any stress placed on these connectors. So this will ensure that the wires will not be pulled away from our circuit board. Notice also that I have little pieces of tape here with numbers on each wire, numbered from 1 to 27. I've also placed a piece of tape here, sticky side up, and then I've placed the wires in order on that tape and put another piece of tape over the top. So this will keep them pretty stationary and in order when next time we start using these wires to find out what combinations give us characters. So that's it for this video. Next time we'll continue on with the wires, and I'll also give you some information on where you can and buy your products. I'll give you some suppliers. So that's it for this video. If you like this, please click the like button. If you would like to leave a comment or send me a message, that would be great. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless.